Hello, welcome back to Benosishi LiveNoding. We're gonna continue with our Piet Mondrian reverse engineering. So basically, I look at his artwork and then trying to figure out what's actually the rules to make this artwork. Um, can we just like square? We look at the photos and then kind of making squares and then start to get something that looks like this, like square art of Piet Mondrian. There are many ways to do this, I believe. So this is like kind of what I was thinking at some point. It's almost like subdivision surface algorithm, but just a little bit more advanced. So the more you have, you start with something that's large area, and then make squares around it, and then you get smaller and smaller the more you get into the details. So it's kind of like adaptive subdivisions in a way. So I'm gonna create something that's a little bit simplified, much more simple. But I know I will be using subdivision. So subdivide, we have these nodes called subdivide, and we can use this maybe with plane. So I have a few ideas of how to do this, but I'm gonna show you the simple one. It actually was inspired by a setup by Benny Govaerts. So subdivide, oops, somehow slow. I'll just call it subdi. So I'll have a plane. If I plug this guy like this and then create viewer draw. So let's see how it looks if we subdivide it multiple times. So it doesn't work unless you plug in the edges. So you can subdivide a plane very quickly this way. It's kind of what we need. So the idea is you can do it in many different ways. So you have like a grid, a grid of some sort, which is already square, and then you divide it like this. You can randomize the lines, but for each square you perhaps can just replace it with another subdivided square, so you end up with subdivisions inside subdivisions. So that's kind of the idea. In fact, you can actually make something like this in a, it's possible to make something like this with a certain algorithm. So this square, of course, can be any square layout. It could also be something like that's a little bit more abstract, and you can do this manually as well. But in this case, I want this to be automatic. So yeah, it's interesting. So this is almost like tissue add-on and adaptive polygon. So we can use that idea as well. But for now, we're just gonna be using the subdivisions, and I will create a cut that's basically random. So I'm gonna create a random number. Let's make it random number between, so we cannot have, oh, so we cannot have number of subdivision of 0, unfortunately. So subdivision of 1 is the original. So between 1 and 4, and I just plug this there. So we have some kind of cuts. We have actually 10 cuts, and we simply spread them apart using another plane, and then put this in the matrix. Let's make this 3 by 3, so we have 9. Put this to 9, or we can have more, like so 10 and 3, so we have 30 variations of this subdivision cutting. So the result, you can see yourself, it's already kind of Mondrian like. It's not, I mean, not really, it's a much simplified version. So you can do it this way and then simply just bake and merge the result. Benny actually have an example, really good one. So he made this artwork using a similar setup. Yeah, it's very interesting. And last night I actually play around with this, and I have something that's a little bit different, slightly more convoluted, but it's actually kind of interesting. It's almost like if you think of an architecture like box, a simple box, a default box, and then you kind of want to make details around the box in a Mondrian kind of fashion. Maybe you can think of the door or the windows. It's similar ideas. So here I'm using exactly adaptive polygons, and inset special is just for an additional details. You don't actually need this, but what behind it is actually kind of interesting, because what I did was simply, just like before, I have a couple of planes, each one with different subdivisions. So I start with this plane, and I have subdivision 1, and then 2, and 3, and then each one of them is become like this switch. Spreadshop actually have a switch node that's supposed to be a little bit more compact, which is this guy, but this one doesn't work as well in 2.8T yet. You need to go back to 2.79, and this works really well. But in this case, I'm just going to be using this multiple switch node, one for the vertices and the other one is for the polygon. And so we have this branching of data, and then we have switch node, and we simply want to have kind of on and off, but based on 3 different options. So I have this random number over here, which is gonna be generating number between, it's either 0 or 1 or 2, right? This is the random number. And then here I have this kind of branching. If it's equal 1, so this could be 0 or 1 or 2. If it's equal 1, then give a value of 0 or 1, true or false. So we either have true or false, and then I split it here and then plug this into the switch, and same thing with the second options. If it's equal true, then give a value of true, otherwise give value of 0. So using these informations, I just plug everything. It's a little bit messy, complicated, but it's actually very simple, and the output goes into this adaptive polygon. So the idea is that we have just plane like this, and then we give it a value of either 0 or 1 or 2 randomly, everything just randomly, and based on this value we're gonna get the data that's coming in. Only 3 value in this case, but we end up with something like this. It's similar idea to the subdivision one, except that here we can do a little bit more. Like if we started to give it some kind of fractal, so we can fractalize some of them, keep the others kind of basic. We can add fractal, and then we can simply bake it out. You can bake it out as a separate objects or a single object. Remember in Blender, if you just bake it and then you have lots of objects, it's gonna be a little bit slow. So now you can see this kind of like a 3D is Mondrian art. I mean, Mondrian art is actually much simpler or much complex depending on how you look at it, because like I said, with this kind of thing, it's almost like if you provide a canvas and then you ask, you subdivide it and you ask many people to create more square, and then each one of them with a random subdivisions, and then you just stick and put them all together. It's actually really interesting. It's almost, like I said, it's almost like newspaper layout. If you look at newspaper from different countries, look at this, and then if you look at this and you just make subdivisions based on newspaper, that's kind of what it's happening. It's also like, it could be like a web layout. Sometimes it's really packed. Yeah, so that's really interesting. You could also look at, there was an experiment, this Reddit places artwork, which is a bit crazy, but this is also kind of like a really complicated collaborations artwork. It's like Mondrian, it's really bizarre. So what's the idea? There's some kind of rules. Everyone can put a bunch of pixels over time. It creates this kind of artwork. They're all sort of people working on this. Sometimes you can override. It's almost like a mashup. It's almost like a machine learning or deep dream of Mondrian applied to a photo. But we don't need to go this far, really. It's sometimes making it a little bit procedural and a little bit of manual is actually gonna create something that's a little bit more natural. I guess that's one can be very philosophical about art. It's interesting, once you have a frame and then you ask people to make artwork and put it on the frame, you get all kind of different results. All right, so there you go. Hopefully you find this interesting. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.